Most gacha game collaborations aren't that great. Usually, it's just a few members of the main cast being thrown in as rate-up characters for a limited time, accompanied by a story that is mediocre at best, and then the companies call it a day. This leads to the vast majority of collaborations in gacha games to be seen as nothing more than a glorified cash grab. This isn't to say that the game hosting the collaboration is at fault, as there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes, as the owners of the IPs have the final say in what can or cannot happen in the collaboration. Sometimes, like finding a needle in a haystack or a diamond in the rough, a collaboration is done so well that either the collaboration IP owners gave the game devs free rein to do whatever they want, or that the IP owners were on board and agreed with a lot of what the gacha game devs had in mind. The collaboration between Wuthering Waves and Cyberpunk Edgerunners is one such example, and I honest to God believe that this was a love letter to the anime series from Kuro Games themselves. I will admit that I only watched Edgerunners recently. And by recently, I meant I was watching it while mindlessly farming materials for both Lucy and Rebecca, while also doing some overworld stuff for a few extra asteroids. And boy am I glad that I did, as it made the entire collab story so much better for it. Spoilers by the way, for both Edgerunners and the collab story. So I recommend watching this only if you already experienced both stories, or just don't care for spoilers. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Honestly, the event just felt as close to a canonical 11th episode to the anime as we could get, especially with how it gave Lucy closure over the death of David and Rebecca, and the other members of her old team. As I was going through the story, I was wondering if this was taking place during the time skip just over halfway through the anime. The David that we see in-game doesn't have the chrome lines on his face as he does post-time skip, but that contradicts the opening when Lucy was sleeping by the window with a backdrop that was clearly on the moon. But as the story went on, and with how Lucy more or less had PTSD from Adam Smasher, Lucy's reaction every time David was mentioned, and being unable to tell Rebecca what was on her mind, I thought, yeah, this is definitely post-anime. Then, near the end of the story, Rebecca just straight up tells Lucy that she knew that she was already dead. This was a nice change of pace, as I thought that after Lucy told Rebecca that both she and David died, Rebecca would start denying everything. So her saying that she already knew honestly took me by surprise. And the fact that she just tells Lucy that she and David still exist is because Lucy still has things to tell them. It was such a good line. After the final fight with Adam Smasher on the moon and the reunion with David and fulfilling their dream of going to the moon together, it finally gave Lucy closure. Upon returning to her world, after getting that final push from both David and Rebecca to take that step forward, Lucy doesn't remember much of what happened, but given how she says it was a good dream and the smile on her face at the end, it's clear that she is no longer tied down by the ghost of her past. Honestly, if the Wuthering Waves part was removed from the story, we will still be left with the story of Lucy confronting and overcoming her inner demons and literal nightmare in Adam Smasher. And the fact that it could be played off as just a dream isn't necessarily a bad thing, as brain dances or BDs are literally a thing in Cyberpunk, and who's to say that therapeutic BDs don't exist? And speaking of Adam Smasher, I love how the story depicted him as this unstoppable juggernaut, which is exactly what he is in the world of Cyberpunk. I mean, sure, there are some players who beat Adam Smasher at the beginning of the game at level 1 with only a dildo or something, but for most, if not all, first-time players, Smasher was quite literally the monster that the lore depicted him as. The only reason why this nightmare version of Smasher was defeated is because Lucy was able to complete the Dream Band, which is the logo on the back of David's shirt, but the final piece of the Dream Band was on the moon. Not only was this the place that David promised he would take her, but it was only a location that she reached in the Somnor after finally coming to terms that Rebecca and David were well and truly dead. But even so, she needs to keep living. As Rebecca said,
"No matter if reality's a fucking meat grinder, you gotta wake up and face it."
his fight is also really fun, even in the nightmare challenges. There are also challenges of beating D5 Smasher with only Lucy and Rebecca, and then soloing him with them, which is just another nice layer of closure. So, due to the fact that this entire thing could canonically have happened in the world of Cyberpunk inside of a BD, and since Rover isn't the main character and is more of a supportive character, this is why I consider the story to be the closest thing to a canonical episode 11 of Edgerunners. Is it canon? No, not really. Not unless the devs directly confirm that it is. But it's canon to me. With the story out of the way, let's talk about the other aspects of the collaboration that I liked, starting with the character designs. Kuro Games absolutely nailed the designs for Lucy, Rebecca, and David. David looks a little younger, even when compared to his pre-timeskip version, but this makes sense as pre-timeskip David is the one that Lucy fell in love with. But other than that, all three characters are a near one-to-one recreation of their anime designs. Not to mention that their attack animations are also really faithful to what they do in the anime, with maybe a couple of creative liberties here and there. Like Lucy using a gun. Maybe it's only because I watched the anime once, but I don't really remember her using a gun in the anime. She primarily hacks her targets or uses her wires, which she does do in her attack animations. Her hacking enemies with her skill and liberation is probably one of the most unique attacks in the game, which is fitting as, you know, she's a hacker. I also liked how they put an in-game reason as to how she can still hack enemies that aren't just fully mechanical constructs. Sure, it was pretty much a throwaway line with it being her resonance ability, but at least they mentioned it instead of it just being hand-waved away as if it didn't matter. Even Rebecca has a resonance ability in firearm summoning, which was never mentioned through dialogue but can easily be found by checking her Forte examination report. And speaking of Rebecca, holy moly, she is extremely expressive. I didn't even know the character models were capable of distorting their facial features to that degree, like her mouth going completely off its axis, or the fact that her jacket has functioning pockets. Both her and Lucy's interactions with the rest of the Wuthering Waves cast was extremely limited, which I can understand because a lot of the budget probably already went into having this collab happen, paying the voice actors for having nearly every single line in this collaboration voiced, and those working behind the scenes to bring Lucy, Rebecca, David, and Anna Smasher to life. And speaking of Smasher, I already mentioned that he was depicted as a juggernaut earlier in the story section, and I know that's what he is in the world of Cyberpunk, but hot damn, he is an absolute unit. The first time we see him in game, he absolutely towers over Lucy. He felt like an actual indomitable force, and that's exactly how he should be. During the final story fight, I especially loved how they brought in Spectral Rover's time stop mechanic as more than just a gameplay feature. After all, what's super speed compared to time coming to a complete halt? Though I assume Flash would have words to say about that. My favorite appearance of Smasher was when we were in Night City and how he just kept appearing. It was a chase scene that made him feel like an actual threat due to the fact that we couldn't damage him and how he just kept impeding our progress. And on the topic of Night City, holy damn, it looks amazing. While I was a bit disappointed that it was only a tiny area, roughly a quarter of the size of Star Torch Academy, the devs clearly went for quality over quantity. I haven't touched Cyberpunk, the game, since the horrible launch way back in December of 2020, but I still remember walking around at night and just enjoying the city for what it was, and this small portion of the market in Wuthering Waves brought that same feeling back. There are a bunch of little hacking puzzles that you can do that are a one-to-one re-implementation of the hacking in Cyberpunk. You can even go to the house that David and Lucy owned in the anime that I'm also 99% sure is actually in the game, and the view from the roof is great. My game did have a visual glitch during the cutscene with Lucy and Giant David. There was supposed to be a glass railing for Lucy to lean on, but when I was playing through it, the railing just wasn't there, so Lucy was just leaning on air. Just as buggy as the launch of the actual game. And speaking of bugs, for some reason my game kept swapping between the English voices and Japanese voices even though I didn't go into the menu to change it. I was playing in English for this patch, but Lucy suddenly spoke Japanese during her liberation and only for her liberation. Everything else was in English. Rebecca was the opposite. English voice for the liberation and Japanese for the rest of her combat lines.
Moment of resonance.
Just what the hell are you? Over here!
アイスごと叩き合ってあげる。全部消してあげる。
At all!
I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but I honestly quite enjoyed it as I've been wanting a feature in-game where you can set certain characters' voices to be in separate languages. Is this collaboration a perfect event? No. There are issues, the biggest one being the collab gacha currency being separate from the usual poll currency that the game has, and the fact that we are given less corals per poll. That's a scummy practice no matter how you look at it. But there are so many positives from this event that I would rather focus on instead of souring my experience with the few negatives. There are a lot more things about the collaboration that I loved and want to talk about, but that will cause this video to be extremely long, and I don't feel like making another video that's the length of a feature film, so I'll end it off on one last note. If you go to the moon and look at Earth, that's not Earth, that's Solaris 3. The etheric sea is also visible and it surrounds the entire planet. I initially thought that Sol 3 was just a really badly pixelated render of Earth. Kind of like how devs will use low poly models for things far away to reduce stress on the in-game engine. But then I took a closer look at it and noticed that A, what I assumed was a low poly model was the effect of looking at something through moving water, and B, the landmasses and continents weren't the same as Earth's. I absolutely love this. They kept the lore and world building consistent even in a collab. But that begs the question, are we actually on the moon of Solaris 3 even though we originally arrived on the moon while inside of Lucy Somnor? And if we were in Lucy Somnor, wouldn't Sol 3 be Earth instead? Questions for later, I'm not a lore guy. And maybe they explained it in-game and I just missed it. Could be possible. It was like 6 AM when I finished the story and I was up for like almost 30 hours at that point. If you haven't played through the collaboration story and or haven't watched Edgerunners, I highly recommend doing both. Preferably watching the anime first and then playing through the story. The anime is only 10 episodes, which I realize is still nearly 4 hours give or take, but it makes the experience so much better. That being said, if you are still watching, thank you for making it this far, and until we meet again in the boundless sea of stars.